She closes her fingers around my wrist before I finish the sentence, and the word I was going to say next, the one I have carried for 2 years, rehearsed in 30 different registers, never delivered, dissolves somewhere between my sternum and my throat. Her grip is not firm, it is complete. Her thumb settles at the inner bone of my wrist, directly over the pulse, and she is not pressing. She is simply there, in the way that a sentence already written is simply there, finished, not asking for revision. The installation spot above image 7 throws warm light at the left side of her face. She says, I wrote less than I saw, something at the base of my ribcage locks. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you're watching from and subscribe. 2 years ago, on a Wednesday afternoon in the 3rd week of my first major exhibition, I was in the gallery's back room eating a sandwich I had bought at the shop on the corner and answering emails that were either congratulatory or administrative and required the same response either way. The show had been open for 11 days. The work had taken 4 years in the making and 3 in the editing, and the opening night had produced in me approximately the same sensation as finishing a long drive in the dark. A vast flatness, a sense of arrival that felt nothing like what arrival was supposed to feel like. I had been told by people who loved me and by people who had no particular investment in my welfare but had opinions about the exhibition industry that this was normal. The work was on the walls, the critical cycle had begun. Whatever the next thing was, it had not yet announced itself. I was rereading an email from my gallerist Petra about the installation of the catalog when Petra herself knocked on the back room's door and opened it without waiting, which was her normal operational style and which I had never minded. She said, Cass Marin is in the gallery. I said, I'm sorry. Petra said, she came alone. She has been here for 40 minutes and she's still on image 7. I thought you should know. I ate the rest of my sandwich. I did not go into the gallery. I knew enough about Cass Marin's process. Everyone who had had any sustained contact with the London arts criticism ecosystem for more than 18 months knew enough about her process to understand that an appearance in a gallery was not an invitation. She attended alone. She wrote from a single visit. She did not speak to artists during the work's active critical period, which she defined as the exhibition's run. Her reviews were not conversations. They were conclusions reached in private and published with a precision that made you feel she had been carrying the language already before she saw the work and had only needed to verify that the work deserved it. I did not go into the gallery. I sat in the back room and I listened to the particular quality of quiet that the gallery produced on its far side of the door, and I ate my sandwich, and I thought about nothing in particular. The review ran on Friday. I read it on my phone at 6:49 a.m. before I had made coffee, sitting on the edge of my bed in the gray early light of a November morning, wearing the oversized sweater I slept in and holding the phone in both hands in the way that I had not held my phone since waiting for exam results at 22. The review was 6 paragraphs. The first paragraph established the context of the exhibition: documentary photography, working-class labor, a northern coastal town, the usual critical coordinates. The second paragraph moved into the structural argument: the sequencing, the decisions about proximity and distance, the way the 40 prints created a grammar that was larger than any individual image. The third paragraph broke down the work's relationship to a tradition she named and then departed from, carefully. The fourth paragraph surprised me. She talked about silence, about the photographs that did not include faces, about absence as compositional choice. The fifth paragraph turned to image 7. I read the fifth paragraph 4 times before I got to the word inevitable. She used it to describe the formal decision in image 7. The angle, the quality of the northern light, the lone figure at the tideline, the specific relationship between what was in focus and what wasn't. She wrote that the decision was not a choice the photographer had made so much as a conclusion she had arrived at, that the image had the quality of inevitability in the sense that the best documentary work always does, which is to say it appears not to have been composed, but only witnessed, as though the photographer had simply been standing at the one location in the world where that exact truth was visible, at the exact moment it was true, and had raised her camera. She wrote the word inevitable, and then continued the paragraph, and then ended the review, and the review was finished. I read the 5th paragraph 17 times. I read it on the edge of my bed in November at 6:49 a.m., and then I made coffee, and I read it again, and I thought, that is exactly what it was. That is the one word I have not been able to say to anyone about this image in 4 years of carrying it. Inevitable. Not that I had made the right decision, not that the image was good, not that the work was strong, but that it was the only possible outcome of every choice and instinct and compulsion that had preceded it, as though the image had been determined before I took it, and I had simply been the mechanism through which it arrived. I thought, she saw it. I thought, she saw it, and she knew the word for it, and she used it in a public document, and I cannot ask her about it, because that is not how this works. I made my coffee, and I drank it, and I did not email anyone, and I did not call anyone. And I sat with the word inevitable for the rest of that day in the way that you sit with something that has named you accurately and precisely from a distance, which is a very specific kind of company. I did not know, at 6:49 a.m. on that Friday morning in November, sitting on the edge of my bed in the gray light with my coffee getting cold, that I had just received the commission for the next 2 years of my life, that I would spend those 2 years working toward a standard set by a single word in a single paragraph. Written by a woman I had not met in a 6-paragraph review published on a Friday morning. I did not know that I would spend those 2 years wanting to ask her one question. I did not know that I would be able to, eventually, at 10:15 p.m. on the evening of my second exhibition's private preview, in a gallery she was not invited to, having found her standing in front of Image 7 with her hands in her jacket pockets not taking notes. The second body of work took 22 months. I started it in January in the coastal town again. Not the same location, different town, 200 miles south, similar geology. I didn't know at the beginning what I was making. This is not unusual. I rarely know what I am making at the beginning. What I know at the beginning is what quality I am pursuing. A kind of tonality, a register, a way a place or a person or a light condition looks when it is being looked at correctly. I go toward that quality and I follow it, and eventually, somewhere in the middle of the working period, the work tells me what it is. The second body told me what it was in April, 8 months in a bathroom in a rented cottage in West Cornwall, looking at a contact sheet on my laptop. The contact sheet was from a day's work on the coast. I had been photographing sea workers, specifically the quality of attention on the face of people doing physically demanding labor alone, which is a very specific expression, one that closes the face inward while the body continues outward, a kind of double register. I had 112 frames from the day. I was going through them in the bathroom because the light was better there, which was not optimal, but was true. Frame 67 stopped me. I do not know what to say about frame 67, except that it had the quality I was pursuing. That same particular inevitability, the sense that this exact configuration of light and attention and angle was the only one that could have existed. And that I sat in the bathroom in West Cornwall for 20 minutes, looking at it, before I understood what was happening. I was making a second body of work in answer to a word. That is not a rational way to spend 22 months. I am aware of this. I was aware of it in the bathroom in West Cornwall, sitting on the edge of the tub with my laptop on my knees, looking at frame 67. But rationality is not the instrument that determines the direction of a body of work. Something else does that. Something that has its own requirements and its own logic, and that does not particularly care whether you can account for it. I spent 22 months making work in answer to the word inevitable, written in a 5-line paragraph in a 6-paragraph review by a critic I had not spoken to. And I did not tell anyone that this was what I was doing. Petra asked me in September of the working year how the body was going. I told her it was going well. She asked if it was a continuation or a departure. I thought about frame 67 and about the contact sheet and about the quality I was following, and I said, continuation. She accepted this. It was close enough to true. By the time I started editing, October, 11 months from the end, I had 4,037 frames. I edited to 31. 31 images arranged in a sequence that was, structurally, a conversation. Not a dialogue, something closer to a call and response or a series of propositions, each image offering something the next image either received or complicated. Petra looked at the edit in November and was quiet for a long time and then said, "This is different from the first." I said, "Yes." She said, "It's more personal." I didn't answer that directly. I said, "The sequence is important. The sequence is the argument." She said, "I can see that." She said, "It opens in 3 weeks." I had 3 weeks. I spent the first 2 weeks on logistics and the third week in the gallery, supervising installation. The gallery was the same, Petra's gallery in Bermondsey, long and narrow, the same configuration as the first show. I had spent 3 weeks learning the space again, measuring it, understanding where the light fell at different times of day, understanding what the white walls did to the prints in different conditions. The installation was precise work. It required measuring, leveling, adjusting. I was good at it. I found it calming in the way that practical, physical tasks are calming. The requirement to be present, to attend to millimeter-level decisions, to care about exactly one small, specific thing at a time. On the evening of the private preview, 3 days before the public opening, and the installation team had left at 8, I had told them to go. I wanted to finish the last 3 prints alone, in the quiet, to see the show in its finished state before anyone else did. Petra had offered to stay. I had declined. She had given me the key code and left. By 10 o'clock, I had hung 2 of the 3 remaining prints. Image 12 and Image 23 were level and lit and on the walls. Image 7, not the 7th print, but the image I called Image 7, the one that had started both bodies of work, the contact print of the original that I had remade for this show, larger, different crop, was in its position on the midpoint of the left wall, its installation spot already hung and live because I had done that first, as a fixed point to work from. I was leveling the bracket for Image 28, the second to last print, at the far end of the gallery's right wall, when I saw her. Not directly. I saw her in the way that you see something in peripheral vision that is not where you expected it to be. A stillness in a space that had been empty. I processed it the way the body processes the unexpected before the mind catches up. A contraction somewhere below the sternum, a shift in the quality of my attention, a pulling of focus away from the spirit level in my hands toward the midpoint of the left wall. She was standing in front of Image 7 with her hands in her jacket pockets. Dark blazer, slim dark trousers, straight jet black hair, loose at the collarbone. She was not moving. She was not taking notes. She was not doing anything that I could name as an activity. She was standing in front of Image 7 in the warm circle of its installation spot, and she had been there long enough that her posture had settled into something that was not performance. The slight forward lean of someone looking at something closely, the weight distributed, the hands not decorative. I was at the far end of the gallery. She was at the midpoint. The distance was approximately 14 meters. I became aware, with a clarity that was disproportionate to the situation, of exactly what I was wearing. The dark olive overalls, practical, stained at the hem from installation adhesive, the cream long sleeve underneath. The blush lace bralette, Petra had commented on it at 9 a.m. when I'd arrived, said it was pretty for an installation day, and I had said I hadn't thought about it. I had thought about it. I was not going to examine this further. I set the spirit level flat on the floor beside the bracket. I didn't set it down deliberately. My hands released it. My hands had decided, apparently, that the spirit level was no longer relevant to the situation. I walked the length of the gallery. The overhead installation lights were on. Harsh, practical, working light quality. And the only pool of warm directional light in the room was the single spot on Image 7, which meant that as I walked toward Cass, I was walking from working light into warmth. And she was already in the warmth, had been in it for however long she had been standing there. And I registered this in some way that I was not prepared to translate into language. I stopped 1 meter from her, maybe slightly less. She had not moved. She did not turn when I approached, which suggested she knew I was coming and had made a decision about how to receive me. I knew this quality in her work, the deliberateness of her attention, the sense that every choice of focus was a choice with full awareness of what was being excluded. She was choosing, in this moment, to continue looking at Image 7. I said, "You weren't invited to this one." My voice was level. I was pleased with this. She said, without turning, "No." A single syllable, not an apology, and not an explanation, and not a question. Then she turned. She looked at me. The full look. I knew it from across a room at events I had attended in the 2 years since the review, at panel discussions and prize ceremonies and openings. The critic's look, the one that reads a work, that takes it in from several distances at once, structural and surface and the relationship between them. She had given that look to 40 of my prints over 2 years, and I had known about it without being in the room for it, and now I was in the room for it, and it landed in my sternum like a physical event. Then she looked at Image 7, then back at me. She said, "This is what you made after." It was not a question, it was a reading, the same quality as the review, the precision of naming something that was true before it was said. I said, "Yes." The installation spot was warm on the left side of my face. I could feel it specifically. Outside the spot's radius, the gallery was working light bright and slightly cold. Inside the spot where we were both standing, the warmth was directional and held, and it made the space feel smaller and more specific than the 14 meters of gallery corridor. She reached out. Her hand came toward my wrist, the right one, the one that had been holding the spirit level until approximately 40 seconds ago, the one that was now doing nothing, hanging at my side, making no claim on any object or activity. Her fingers closed around it slowly, not tight, settled. Her thumb found the inner bone of my wrist and stopped there, directly over the pulse, which was doing something I was not going to describe. She said, "I wrote less than I saw." I was aware of several things simultaneously: the warmth of the spot on my left cheek and shoulder, the cooler temperature of her hand against my wrist, not cold, but cooler than I expected, and then warming. The electrical hum of the installation lighting above, which had been constant for 3 hours and which was now the loudest thing in the room. The gallery's climate system, a low undertone that I had stopped hearing hours ago and was hearing again. The spirit level on the floor at the far end of the gallery, not our concern anymore. I said, "You used a word." She didn't ask which word. This told me something. The absence of the question told me something specific and precise, and I logged it in the way that I log photographic details. Not interpretation, just observation. She did not ask which word. She knew which word. She said. I came back a second time. She said it to the photograph, not to me. Her gaze moved from my face to image 7 as she said it. And it was the first time in the conversation that she had looked away from me, and the quality of the movement, the slight turn of her jaw, the shift of those dark, deep-set eyes, was the quality of someone saying something they had held for a long time, the kind of statement that requires looking at something stable and inanimate to be said without fracturing. I waited. The climate system continued. The spot held its warmth on us both. She said, "I read it before I came tonight, the second time, the notes I made from the first visit." Her voice was precise and careful in the way that her prose was precise and careful. Not emotional, not withholding, but structured, every word in its exact position. "I wanted to know what I had missed, what I was likely to have failed to account for in the work you were going to make next." I said, "And?" She was quiet for a long moment, still holding my wrist. Her thumb had not moved from the inner bone. It was not pressing, not absent, simply resting, making contact with a specificity that I could feel more than was reasonable, given the small area of surface involved. She said, "You didn't make the same thing." I said, "No." She said, "You made something that answers it." I said, "Yes." The room held the word, the climate system, the spot's electrical hum. The warmth, contained and directional, on the left side of both our faces now that we were standing inside it at this particular angle, this particular proximity, which was not a professional proximity and had not been, I thought, from the moment she had reached for my wrist. Her thumb shifted slightly, not pressure. A small movement. Perhaps she was adjusting. Perhaps she was deciding something. I felt it in my wrist and in the tendons of my forearm and in a place that was further up than either of those and had no good medical name. I said, "You used the word inevitable." She looked at me. I said, "In the 5th paragraph, about image 7. She said, "I know what I wrote." I said, "I know you do. I read it 17 times. Something changed in her expression. Not a smile. She didn't smile. Something smaller and more specific. A slight shift at the outer corner of one eye. A quality in the stillness of her face that had not been there before, that made the stillness itself look different, like the same surface in different light. I had been photographing people for 11 years. I knew the difference between a face performing composure and a face working for it. She was working for it. I said, I couldn't stop reading it because it was the one thing I had felt about the image that I couldn't say, that it was, that it had to be, that specific frame, that specific choice, that it wasn't that I had made it. It was that it had arrived and I had been the available mechanism. She was very still. I said, "And then you named it in a public document, and I couldn't ask you about it because that's not how any of this works." She said quietly, "No, it's not." A beat, the spot, the hum. She said, "I thought about whether to come tonight for 3 weeks." She said it in the same precise level register, the same quality of statement she had used for everything else, but the content of it was different from everything else, and the difference was legible. She was not explaining herself, she was making a record. I have not attended a preview in 7 years. Not any preview, any artist, I said. I know, she said. I wanted to see how you had used the answer to the thing I saw. Her thumb moved again at my wrist. Not quite the same motion as before, slightly slower, a different quality of small adjustment. That is an unusual sentence to have to explain, I said. You don't have to explain it to me. Her eyes were on mine, dark, deep-set, with the quality of sustained attention, not performance, not professional instrument being deployed, something else. Something that had the weight of 2 years of private decision and a 3-week debate about whether to attend a preview and a night spent reading old notes before coming here, to this gallery, at 10 p.m. She released my wrist, not abruptly. The way a book closes when you've held it for a while, the hand opens, the contact ends, not fast and not slow, simply resolved. She looked at image 7. I looked at the place on my wrist where her thumb had been, and then at image 7 too, because it gave me something to do with my eyes. She bent down, smoothly, and picked up something from the floor. The spirit level. She had not passed it. It had been at the far end of the gallery. She must have walked the full length of the room on the way in without my noticing, or I had noticed and had not distinguished the memory clearly, because my attention had been elsewhere even then. She looked at the spirit level. A long, unhurried look, the way she looked at print captions in galleries, not cursory, not performing attention, simply reading. Then she set it on the floor again, in the middle of the gallery, with the deliberateness of putting something down that had been attended to. She said, "Go on with what you were doing." I said, "I've lost track of what I was doing." She said, "You were leveling image 28. I looked at her. She had been in the gallery long enough to have read the print order. She had come here, to an unopened exhibition, and stood in front of image 7 and waited and had noted the print sequence on the way to her position. I did not know what to do with this information, except log it and know that I would return to it. I said, "I was, yes." She said, "I'll wait." I walked back to the far end of the gallery. I picked up the spirit level from the floor. I leveled image 28. I was aware, as I did this, of Cass behind me at the gallery's midpoint, standing in the warmth of image 7's spot, not moving, and the awareness was a physical condition, a sustained alertness in the back of my neck, the quality of the air between us as a thing I could feel at 14 meters, which was not a sensation I could account for rationally, and which I had stopped trying to account for approximately 30 seconds after she had closed her fingers around my wrist. I hung image 28. I looked at it. I adjusted it 2 millimeters left. I looked at it again. The spirit level said it was straight. I trusted the spirit level. I walked back to the midpoint of the gallery. I had thought, walking the length of the room, about whether I would say anything else. I had no plan for what to say. I had spent 2 years rehearsing a question in the abstract, in the way you rehearse conversations that you have assigned to the category of the impossible. And now that the conversation was happening, I had no use for the rehearsed version, because the rehearsed version had been predicated on a professional context. A panel, an event, a mutual acquaintances gathering, and this was none of those things. This was an empty gallery at 10 at night with the installation lights on and image 7 lit by its spot and Cass, who had not been invited, standing in front of it. I stopped at the edge of the warm circle of light. I said, "What did you see that you didn't write?" Cass went still. She was good at controlled stillness. Professionally good, instrumentally good, the kind of stillness that reads in person the same way it reads in the quality of her prose. Deliberate, chosen, not the absence of movement, but its active suppression. She could be still in a way that communicated nothing except the fact of the stillness, and I had seen her deploy it at panel discussions and public events and understood it as a professional posture. This was different. This was the kind of stillness that comes from a question landing in a body that was not braced for it. A different quality of held position, something the body does when it is absorbing impact rather than controlling presentation. Her hands stayed in her jacket pockets. Her shoulders did not change their angle, but something in the distribution of her weight shifted, very slightly, toward her left foot, in the way a person's weight shifts when something unexpected arrives and the body redistributes to receive it. I watched this. I had been watching her for the duration of our conversation in the way that I watch everything, continuously, with the specific attention that 11 years of documentary photography installs in you. The habit of presence, the habit of looking without performing the look. And I saw. This question had done something to her. She looked at my hands, not my face, my hands. Both of them at my sides, the spirit level now back on the gallery floor behind me where I had set it before walking back. She looked at my hands, empty, doing nothing, and she did not return to the photograph. And she did not answer immediately. The installation lighting hummed above us. The gallery's climate system worked its low, constant undertone. The spot on image 7 was warm at my left side, warm and directional and specific, the kind of warmth that comes from a single concentrated source, nothing diffuse about it. She said, "I saw an argument." I waited. She said, "Not the argument in the work." A different argument, an argument between what you had made and what you had not allowed yourself to make yet. She was looking at my hands still. Between the precision of the formal decisions and what was generating them, between the surface of the documentary practice and what was underneath it, what you were pointed at. She looked up. "At me," she said. "I did not write that." I said, "Why not?" She said, "Because it was not the review's argument to make." The review's argument was about the work. What I saw was about the direction. She paused. Very brief. The clock of the pause was legible. She was making a decision about precision, about how much exactness to allow. What I saw was about what you were going to make next. The spot held its warmth on us both. We were standing at the edge of it, not fully inside it, not fully outside it, at the margin where the warm directional light met the harsh working light of the hanging fixtures above. In the warm circle, the quality of visibility was different, softer on skin, harder on edges. Outside it, everything equally lit, equally exposed, no shelter. She said, "The word I used was the one that fit the image." I said, "I know." She said, "It was not." She stopped. She almost never stopped in public, in professional contexts. She was a person who composed before she spoke and delivered the composed version, clean. The stopping was notable. The stopping was information. It was not a complete account of what made the image inevitable. I said, "What was the incomplete part?" She was quiet for a beat too long. Long enough that the climate system became audible again. Long enough that I became aware of my own breathing, which was not doing what breathing is supposed to do in a neutral, professional situation. She said, "You." One word. The spot's warmth on my left cheek was more present after she said it than it had been before. I don't know how to account for this physiologically. I know that it happened. She said, "The choice was inevitable because of who was making it. The frame existed because of the specific quality of attention bringing it into being. I knew looking at image 7 who you were. As a photographer, as a kind of seeing." She said all of this in the same precise level register. The same register as the review, as though she were still writing the review. "That information did not belong in the published document." I said, "But you kept it." She said, "Yes." I said, "And you came back to the first show a second time." She said, "Yes." I said, "To look at what you'd already seen." She said, "To look at what I hadn't finished seeing. The climate system, the hum." The warm circle of image 7's spot, which we were both still standing at the margin of, and which I was aware of as a boundary I had not yet crossed and had not been invited to cross, and which I was aware also of wanting to cross in a way that I was filing under. Observation, not action. I stepped inside it, not toward her. I moved slightly to my right, which was into the warm circle's center, which put me inside the spot's warmth fully, directly under it, with image 7 directly behind me and the spot above me and Cass at a distance of perhaps 70 centimeters. She watched me do this. Her expression did not change. The professional composure remained, jaw level, dark eyes steady, posture unchanged. But she was watching, and the watching had a quality that I recognized because I had spent 2 years working in it, which is the quality of someone whose attention has been fully gathered into one direction without remainder. She said, "You said I used a word." I said, "Yes." She said, "What did you do with it?" I looked at image 7 above and behind me. I couldn't see it from this angle, obviously. I was facing Cass, and the image was on the wall at my back, but I knew the image, knew it the way I know all the images I've spent years with, in the particular intimacy of having lived inside them during their making and their editing, the intimacy of having held them in the mind long before they were on any wall. I said, "I made this." She said, "I know." She said it quietly. The same word she had used earlier, I know, but the quality of it was different now. Before it had been acknowledgement. Now it was something else, something I didn't have a clean word for, something that sat between acknowledgement and admission. She stepped inside the spot. She moved to close the distance, not to a single position, not to a specific destination, just inside, into the warm circle's perimeter, so that we were both fully in the spot's warmth, and the distance between us was something I would measure in a smaller unit than meters, 50 centimeters, maybe less. The spot's diameter was not designed for two people. It was designed for a single print. It was doing its best. I could smell her at this distance, something clean and structural, cedar and cool linen, the kind of scent that exists in relation to clean air rather than in place of it. She was noticeably taller than me. I was aware of this in the way that geometry becomes legible when the distances are small enough. The angle upward, the slight shift in perspective. Her blazer was open. The installation spot threw warm light at the front of her. The dark blazer's lapels, the slim dark trousers, the black architectural underwire bra visible at the V where the blazer fell open. Clean, precise, structural. I looked at image 7. By which I mean I was aware of her at this distance, and I was managing the data. This awareness was generating, and I was doing this management by directing my eyes at the photograph on the wall behind her left shoulder, which was the only inanimate object in the room that required looking at. She said, "I want to look at this properly." I said, "The image is behind me." She said, "I know where the image is." My breathing made a decision without consulting me. She was looking at me the way she looked at work. I knew the look from across rooms, from panels, from award ceremonies, from watching her move through galleries and events I had attended in the past 2 years. The critic's look, sustained, structural, reading at multiple registers simultaneously. The look that goes from surface to architecture and then back to surface, carrying what the architecture told it. I had imagined being on the receiving end of it. I had not imagined it correctly. The reality of it did something to my chest that had the quality of the word inevitable, and I was not going to say that. She said, "Don't move." I didn't. She lifted her right hand. The motion was deliberate and unhurried, the same quality of deliberateness as her stillness, as her sentences, as the way she had reached for my wrist and closed her fingers slowly. She brought her hand to my forearm, which was bare below the pushed-up sleeve of the cream long sleeve, and the contact was the heel of her palm against the outside of my forearm, very light, and she drew her hand upward, slowly, from the forearm toward the shoulder. The sensation registered in approximately every nerve ending from elbow to shoulder before my mind had finished processing that it was happening. She drew her hand up my arm and over the shoulder of the cream long sleeve and then to the strap of the blush lace bralette, which was visible above the neckline, which had been visible above the neckline for the entire 3 hours of installation work, and which I had not thought anything about until the precise moment when I was aware that someone was looking at it. Her fingertip found the edge of the lace. She traced the edge from the point where it emerged from the neckline, outward toward the shoulder, one finger very slow, the way she would read a caption that she already knew, the way you read something whose content is already held and the rereading is for a different reason. The spot above us was warm. The gallery was otherwise cold and working lit. Inside the spot, this particular circle of warmth and directional light, the temperature was separate from the rest of the room. Contained, specific. The electrical hum of the lighting was the room's only sound. The climate system. My breathing, which was not performing neutrality. She said, tracing the lace edge, "I want to ask you something." I said, "All right," she said. "When you made the images in this sequence, the argument you were making," her finger at the lace edge, tracing, her eyes on my face. "What were you pointed at?" I looked at her. I said, "The same thing you were." Her finger stopped. The spot held its warmth on the blush bralette strap, on Cass's hand, on the particular stretch of collarbone visible above the neckline, the electrical hum, the climate system. 50 centimeters, she said. "That is not a complete sentence." I said, "No." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at image 7, turned her head, the full, clean turn, her jaw angling left, her dark eyes going to the photograph on the wall above my left shoulder. She looked at it the way she had looked at it when I found her. The sustained structural look from the specific proximity of inside the spot's warm circle. She said to the photograph, "What did you make it for?" I said, "You know." She looked back at me. I said, "That's why you're here." The silence was a specific physical condition in the room. Not the absence of sound, the climate system continued, the hum continued, but the absence of anything said, which is a different thing in a space where two people are standing 50 centimeters apart inside a directional spotlight in front of a photograph that has been in both their minds for 2 years. She was very still, the working for it kind of still. The blazer was open, the black underwire bra in the spot's warm throw. Her hair was at her collarbone, straight and black, the way it had been in every professional context I had observed her from across rooms. And she was wearing it the same way here, in this context, which was not any professional context either of us had a name for. I said, "Say what you need me to say." She said, "Tell me what you made it for." I said, "I made it to be worth the word you used." Her hand, which had stopped at the bralette strap, which had been there for the duration of the previous exchange, still not moving, simply present at the edge of the lace, made a small motion. Not away. The thumb shifted like it had shifted at my wrist earlier. A small adjustment, a change in pressure, a different quality of contact with the same surface. She said, "Say that again." I said, "I made it to be worth the word inevitable." Her hand moved. From the bralette strap, upward, to the back of my neck, not fast, not swept, a clear, deliberate motion. The heel of her hand first, and then her fingers spreading at the base of my skull, and the temperature of her hand against my neck was cooler than my skin, and then warming rapidly, and she pulled me in. Not hard, not hesitant, simply resolved, the motion of someone who has been reading a field long enough to know when the reading is done, and the conclusion has been reached. My hands found her waist. The blazer was gone. I was not sure exactly when it had come off. It was simply gone, and my palms were flat against her sides, against the dark trousers waistband, skin and fabric and warmth. And I pressed my hands there, the way you press them against something you want to know the shape of. And I said nothing, because the word I needed had already been said, and there was no sentence to add to it. The installation spot was warm on my left shoulder and on the blush bralette strap. Her hand was at the back of my neck, cooler than expected, warming. The electrical hum of the spot above us, constant. The climate system low and persistent. Image 7 on the wall above and behind her, in the warm, directed light. The coastal figure at the tide line, the quality of light that was not composed but witnessed. The frame that had been the only possible frame. She exhaled, once, when I said the word. A single exhale, slightly wrong, not the controlled exhale of someone managing a professional interaction, but the sound of a breath that has been held for a while and is no longer held. The first sound in this gallery for 2 years that was not part of any performance of either of us. I held her waist. I felt the warmth of the spot on my shoulder and the warmth of her hands at the back of my neck, and these were 2 different temperatures on 2 different parts of my body, and both of them were her. In the way that the room and the image and the word had both been her in the 2 years of working toward a standard set in a single paragraph. She said nothing more. Neither did I. The gallery held the silence the way a gallery does when work is on the walls, and someone is finally looking at it right, contained, specific, doing what it was built to do. At some point we were on the floor. I could not later reconstruct the precise sequence of this. I know that the blazer was off and was on the floor beside the spirit level, and I know that we were sitting with our backs against the wall below image 7. Both of us, in the spot's warmth, which at floor level was lower and different in quality, warming the wall above us more than the floor. The installation lights above the far end of the gallery were still on. The spot above image 7 was still on. The climate system had not changed its operations. The gallery was exactly as it had been. We were on the floor below image 7, backs against the wall, and the spirit level was somewhere in the middle of the room and was not our responsibility. She was not touching me, sitting on the gallery floor. We were side by side, and the warmth of the spot was on both of us from above. And there was the quality of the room that exists after something has been named. A kind of settled, specific quiet, different from before, not the silence of waiting, but the silence of having arrived. She took out her phone. I watched her open something. She tilted the screen toward me without comment. It was the review, the first review. I knew the layout of it before I read a word. I had read it on my phone enough times to know the paragraph breaks by sight. She had it open to the 5th paragraph. The word inevitable was on the 3rd line. She had not highlighted it. It did not need highlighting. She held the screen for me to read for approximately 4 seconds. Then she closed the app and put the phone in her pocket. I said, "You have it saved." She said, "I wrote it." I said, "That's not the same as having it saved. I mean, you have it." She said, "Yes." She was looking at the middle of the gallery, the spirit level on the floor, the gap in the print sequence where my 2 remaining installation brackets were still bare. Image 28 was hung, but the last one, image 31, was still in its sleeve against the wall at the far end. The show was not finished. The gallery was not finished. 3 days from the public opening, and the last print was in its sleeve, and the critic who was going to write the review was sitting on the floor below image 7, with her blazer on the ground beside my spirit level. I said, "The second review," she said. "Yes." I said, "You'll write it." She said, "I will." I said, "And it runs Friday." She said, "If I've seen what I came to see." I looked at her. The spot above us, warm. Her profile, the sharp, angular cheekbone, the defined jaw, the dark, deep-set eyes looking at the middle of the gallery floor, at the spirit level, at whatever she was seeing that I was not. I said, "Have you?" She was quiet for a beat. Not long, the professional stillness was back, but lighter now. The same instrument, but carrying less resistance. She said, "Not yet." She looked at me. Direct. The sustained critic's look, which I was no longer afraid of and which was no longer only professional, had not been only professional since she stepped inside the installation spot. She said, "Image 31. I said, "I know." She said, "Hang it." I stood up. I walked the length of the gallery and the installation lights, past the spirit level on the floor to the sleeve at the far wall. I unpacked image 31 carefully, the final print of the sequence, the one I had held back because it was the one I was least sure about, because it closed the argument in a way that left something unresolved, and I had not decided until the editing process whether an unresolved close was the right choice or the honest one, and had eventually concluded that in this case they were the same. I carried it to its bracket on the right wall, near the midpoint, across from image 7. I leveled it. I retrieved the spirit level from the floor. I looked at Cass, who had risen and was standing again, not against the wall in the middle of the room, equidistant from both images. She was watching me work. She had her hands in her jacket pockets again. The blazer was back on. I had not seen her put it back on. At some point, it had returned. Image 31, a figure at a window. Interior, morning light. Not the coast, inside, domestic, the quality of light that comes through glass early, before the day has decided what kind of day it will be. The figure has their back to the camera. The image is in the documentary series, and also outside it, inside a different kind of privacy, a different relationship between watcher and watched. I knew why it ended the sequence. I did not know if she would see it. I stepped back from the bracket. I held the spirit level at my side. I looked at image 31, then I looked at Cass, who was looking at image 31. She looked at it for a long time. The kind of looking that takes the work seriously, that does not rush to interpretation, that lets the surface be a surface before asking what is underneath it. The professional attention, but no longer only professional. I watched her look at it. This was all I had done, in various forms, for 2 years, directed the looking and waited for her to look, and here it was, happening in my gallery at 10:50 p.m. in the installation lights, with the spirit level in my hand. And I had not imagined it would look like this. She said, without turning from image 31, "This is where the argument ends." I said, "Yes." She said, "Not with a conclusion." I said, "No, with a direction." She was quiet. I said, "Pointing at something." She turned. She looked at me across the middle of the gallery. The installation lights above, the spot still warm on image 7 behind me, image 31 behind her, both of us at the midpoint. She said, "Come here." I walked to her. The spirit level was still in my hand, and I set it on the floor as I reached her, without looking at it, without deliberately deciding to put it down, the way I had set it down at the beginning of the evening when my hands had decided it was not relevant. She looked at me. The full look, the whole of it, surface and structure and what the structure indicated. The reading that was not only the reading, the attention that had never been, in this room, only professional. She said, "The review runs Friday." I said, "I know." She reached up, and her fingers went to the back of my neck again, in the same position, the heel of her hand, and then the fingers spreading at the base of my skull, the cooler temperature against my skin, and this time she did not pull. She simply held, the warmth building between her hand and my neck in the way that warmth builds when two surfaces are in sustained contact. She said quietly, with her hand at the back of my neck, "I saw more than I wrote, the first time." I said, "I know." She said, "I am going to write it this time." I said, "All right?" She said, "All of it." I said, with her hand at the back of my neck and the spot warm on image 7 behind me and image 31 visible over her left shoulder and the spirit level on the floor between our feet. "I know you are." She looked at me for a long moment. Then her hand moved, not away, not down. Her thumb found the back of my neck and pressed, once, gently, at the point where the neck meets the skull, a specific and deliberate pressure, and I felt it move from that location, down through my spine, and into something that had been tightly held for 2 years and was not held anymore. The installation spot was warm above image 7. The climate system continued its low work. The electrical hum. The gallery, my gallery, 3 days before opening, prints on the walls, the last one hung and level, held us both in its specific light. I said, "9 words," she said. "What?" I said. "You said there were 9 words you didn't write the first time, in the email." She was quiet. Very quiet, the working quiet, the composure under something. I said, "I haven't gotten the email yet, It's not 8 in the morning." She said, "No," I said. "But you know what it says," she said. "I know what I'm going to write," I said. "What are the 9 words?" Her hand at the back of my neck, thumb at the base of my skull, the warmth of contact and the warmth of the spot both present and both hers. She looked at me, dark eyes, deep and held in the installation lights of my gallery in front of image 31, with the spirit level on the floor and the whole argument of the second body of work on the walls around us. She said, "The image knows who is looking at it." I counted. 9 words. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. She said, "That's what I didn't write." The warmth, the hum. Image 7 on the wall behind me, image 31 over her left shoulder, the long, narrow gallery with the sequence on both walls, and the spirit level on the floor, and the blazer that had been on the floor and was on her again, and the blush bralette strap warm in the spot's directed light. She pressed her thumb once more at the back of my neck. Not a question. I said, "It's still not 8 in the morning." She said, quietly, with the beginning of something that was not quite a smile and was not its absence either. Something that had the quality of a word that fit. "No, it isn't." The gallery held its specific quiet. The work on the walls, the last print level and hung, the image that started everything, lit by its spot, above the place where we had been sitting on the floor below it. Her hand at the back of my neck. The review, not yet written, running Friday. The 9 words already decided, already true, already as she would write them, as she had seen them, as they would be when they were in the published document, and I would read them at 6:49 a.m. in the gray early light of whatever morning came next. Inevitable.